Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm just going to take a couple minutes while we let everybody get logged in and go over some details for anybody who is new. First of all, thank you for joining us. This is a fun class. Peg and I were talking last week about all the weather and the issues with the cold and the snow and the winter damage, and she and David decided they'd come on and do a class for us about what to do with all of this, and I think a few other things related to the season. So this will be a fun class. I love it when Peg and David do classes together. If you are new and have not attended a webinar before, just a few quick notes for you. To ask questions during the class, you're going to type them into the Q&A box. So click that button, type the question in, and Peg and David will be taking questions at the end of the class. I'll relay those questions onto them. I have opened up the chat, so you're welcome to send questions there as well. Or if you have any technical issues, let me know. I'll do what I can to assist you. And we are recording today. So if you need to leave early or you want to access the class later, share it with your friends. We'll be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, or you can access it on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to do any of that. We're always happy for you guys to share these recordings. I will make a quick note for anyone who's attending outside of our region. Merrifield's located in Northern Virginia. So if you're attending from another state, just be aware you may not have experienced all the snow. So tips for you may be a little bit different. We are, of course, welcome to have you here. I just like to make everybody aware of that. Peg and David, I will let you guys get started. I want to give you as much time as you need.
Very good, and thank you. And I'm very excited today because David and I have been doing, we did for 20 years, the television show, but we rarely have the opportunity to present together. So I'm excited about this today.
Yeah, it's really true. I was thinking if you saw us, there's nothing more than just a little dividing board between our desks at work, and we see each other and we talk, we share our gardening experiences. But it's not often that we actually are in the same place at the same time. So I'm really glad this worked out.
Exactly right. And I always teased when we were doing the TV show together that I would take care of the beauty and David would take care of the beast. Primarily, yes, I am familiar with the beast, okay? But I don't give out information as far as treatment is concerned because he is at the information counter. Well, he knows he's at that counter because he's got it all up here, okay? And he knows how to advise, whereas I don't. I have a tendency, if that beast gets too horrific, to just let it go ahead and die and replace it, okay? But David takes care of beauty and the beast, which he's going to take care of today. And we're going to talk about winter injury or damage and discuss some of the reasons why we may be having some of this. We'll show you some plants and go through that. And we'll talk about just not just the winter injury, but how did drought affect it? How about the snow cover? What should you be doing now and what should you just leave alone? So, David, why don't you start this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've enjoyed just getting ready for today is talking about, just as Peg and I are kind of brainstorming back and forth, this brings all different kind of aspects into gardening. It's not just as simple as saying, oh, it's cold outside, we'll have an opportunity. Hey, not just the weather conditions, but the plants that we choose and select, where we site them, how we care for it. A lot of this goes into all this, gives an opportunity to talk about. But before I jump into that, I've heard Peggy describe this beauty and beast thing so many times. And I have a question for you.
Okay.
Why you've got all that ugly brown foliage on your side of the desk, and I've got the pretty little flowers and the cute little bunnies on mine. I was trying to switch things up on you.
Well, I told you he can take care of beauty and the beast. So you can have both. Now, I'm trying to learn even more about the beast. And I've got a few beasts in my hand. But I actually do know a little bit about them.
All right, forever, always be the diplomat. So we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a couple pictures to help us go through what we want to discuss today. And the first is I'm want to go back. I have some old pictures in my file. I look back. So some of the pictures that I'm sharing, and I'll try to put this in context, actually go back to 2015. And in 2015, we had a winter that dropped down into single digit temperatures. And so some of the extreme conditions we faced this year, we've been through this before. It's not our first rodeo with it. So we sort of have good idea and records of what to expect and anticipate. But I would say cold damage or winter injury, there's so many different aspects to go into this. It can be a combination of cold temperatures, yes, dry conditions, even cold, wet conditions, wind, the type of plants are growing. There's a lot of different variables here. So I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about broadleaf evergreen shrubs. Because if we think about this for just a minute, they're evergreen, so the foliage is out there. They're transpiring, losing moisture through their leaves all winter long. And so it's this greater exposure to the cold. And the fact that they've got these broad, flat leaves with more surface area on, that's probably the plants that are going to be most vulnerable to damage. And I would say, from what I've seen, most of the winter damage we get is just from desiccation. It's just drying out. And especially like this year, I keep saying in January, at the beginning of this year, we were already 10 inches below average rainfall. And we were at the plant clinic begging people last fall, water your plants, make sure everything's really well watered going into winter time. So we started out this year kind of already in a situation where we sort of set up for winter injury this year, just because of the dry conditions that we were going into. And then I've heard some interesting news that the snow that we had, even though we had a generous amount of snow, I'm talking about the storm a couple weeks ago, not just all that amounted to about a total of 2 inches of precipitation.
Right.
So we've been making some good progress now as far as getting moisture back in the ground. But a lot of this just started out with just dry conditions.
Absolutely.
And you look at this this holly and I go now to a close-up image on that. This is desiccation. This is just drying out. The plant's cold hardy, but it just didn't get enough water. And we're going to see that in terms of this dried foliage that's on there.
Right. And this is at my house. The wind sort of collected these in one spot, and it's a huge old, it's 50 years old, Burford holly. And it's probably lost 25% of its leaves. Everything else looks pretty good. But I know that that plant's going to be all right. And I do have a feeling, David, that this plant did suffer from going into winter dry. Now, here, and we need to talk about this as we go through the program, is moisture, because I think that's one of the most difficult things for people to understand. Sometimes I can even get it wrong, is how much moisture is in that ground. And now is a really good time to observe your property. Look closely. Where are you having water settle in and not drain well? I'm excited about that 2 inches that you talked about from the previous ice storm, because I'm not getting any runoff right now. It's all going into the ground, because the beauty of that was it melted from underneath slowly, and that is sinking in. So this Burford holly is going to be just fine.
Right. And I haven't done this, but I would guess that if I was going to the soil probe, even with the the rain and the snow that we've had, which is so welcome, I'm guessing I'd probably still find maybe the top 2-4 inches moist, but if we go below that, it wouldn't surprise me at all to find it's still dry below there. So we're talking about the moisture. It is this slow soaking your tomato that allows it to seep down in the ground and get deeper into the ground we've been
Yes.
missing. But this is really great too, this image, because the leaves are shedding off green. It's not at all unusual that as spring approaches and the plants even begin their growth cycle, you will probably experience this. You'll probably see even more shedding come through as a result of what's happened this winter. But I'm also going to fast forward to show you the end result, saying, hey, the wonderful thing about plants is they're resilient. They can shed leaves, they can grow new leaves. And even though we use the term evergreen, which it is, these leaves can shed off, but they can and will be replaced next spring.
Absolutely. And while we're on this, I'd like to think with this program today, what you really shouldn't be doing in your garden right now. And some of the things, if we have some warm days and you're anxious to get outside, there are some things you can do. And in David's picture here, you can see the large ornamental grasses. And we have left them up for winter interest, beauty, okay? And now they can come down. However, we have been promoting wherever you can, leave the leaves, leave the stems of these grasses, etc., as long until it warms up some, and whatever all those good insects are that are hibernating in there have a chance to live. But if you're anxious to clean up a little bit, and don't remove all those leaves right now, unless you put them in an area where they can stay. And with small spaces, I know it's hard to find those places, but you can cut those ornamental grasses and some of those things back. And if possible, you've got an out of the way place to lay them until it warms up and anything that's living over in those stems can have a chance to.
Well, I
Okay.
think it's all 50, 55 degrees tomorrow. So that might just be an opportunity to go out there and start a little bit of that.
Well, it might be because we've all been inside so long.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah,
I
we
was
really
thinking.
want to get outside.
And I'll put a little plug in on Thursday, just a couple of days from now. I'm doing my virtual plant clinic on pruning where I'll go into a lot more detail. But this is a good time also to do pruning.
Yes.
What I was going to say, but there's a little bit of a difference here, like in regards to winter injury or winter damage. I'm not saying we have to prune off the damaged foliage and stuff. Actually, I would tell you just leave it alone and wait to see what happens, because a lot of this foliage will shed, new growth will come out.
Yeah.
However, if you wanted to do pruning for maintenance reasons or cleanup purposes and everything, we're going where it's an excellent time for that as well.
Yeah, as long as you do it judiciously. Can we bring on the next one, David?
Absolutely.
And this is Otto-Lucan's laurel in my own garden. Pretty much that laurel looks good, but there's spotty places in it where it has winter burn or it has some other issue. Who knows? That's the beast that David needs to take care of. But I will go in a couple of weeks or whenever my pruners are in my hand and snip out some of that looks really bad, because I know that this Otto-Lucans will respond quickly and it will shoot out new growth immediately from that. And if we come back before we go into the next one, David, let's come back to us if we can. I went out and I actually snipped off a few things that aren't looking good. And in shady areas, because this is not good in full sun, is Akuba. It is a wonderful plant for shade or part shade. And look what's going on with that one.
Yes.
Winter damage.
Yeah, just winter damage that's showing up in there. Again, if you can see at home, you probably can't, but all these stems are bright green, they're pliable, they're juicy, buds are viable. I mean, plants can lose leaves and then they can just grow them back.
And this is going to drop on its own.
Oh, yes.
and all that new growth, even down below, because it has advantageous. Am I using the right word? Advantageous buds down along. Not every plant has that, but this one does, and it can come out. So this is why we're saying, just because something doesn't look good right now, you don't go out with your pruners and get rid of it. Okay, so that's just one.
And most of the plants you have there, again, all fit into the same category of broadleaf evergreens, lots of exposed foliage, cold, dry, windy conditions. They'll be coming back. Now, this azalea, still, I'm hoping the flower buds, yeah, I can see, you probably can't, but the flower buds in here are still protected. So typically we would wait and prune those after flowering, because even though the foliage looks a little burned up on there, we still have beautiful flowers ahead for us come April.
Absolutely. You know, I hope I do. Now, with my azaleas, you and I were talking about this earlier, and I think it's I hope I don't make a mess here. Important. As far as fertilization is concerned, David and I are very similar in our thinking, and I compost as many of my leaves as possible. I have a large space to do that, and I do it casually, okay? People with smaller spaces just do a smaller amount, because you're going to have a smaller amount of leaves anyway, you know? But I love to use those composted leaves. But we both agreed, and he doesn't necessarily have as much as I have because his space is smaller. But we use the leaf grow in the bags, right?
Right. Well, what I smell is like, so just one, maintaining your plants, but two, also if you want to help them in their recovery coming through this winter time, the little bit of fertilizer can be helpful. But like Peggy was saying, neither one of us are real heavy handed with the fertilizer. It's totally an option, but I prefer just using a soil conditioner like the compost, the little bit that I produce out in my kitchen, absolutely. And where I'm not producing enough, I'm a big fan of bumper crop, which a lot of you know, and I'll use that sometimes just even as top dressing to my garden beds, both conditioning the soil and adding some organic nutrients to
And
it.
that is organic. And here's what I use. When I do fertilize, and I will, I probably won't fertilize all of my azaleas because I've got over the years really large ones. But I'm looking at them and I'm seeing, not everywhere, because we're going to talk about microclimates where some things are affected more than others. But when I say this particularly, I'm going to go in a couple of weeks or any time now, from now until the next 6 weeks or more, because this is slow release and it's going to help. I just want to give them a boost as soon as possible. So for a lot of these, wherever I can, I'm going to use Plantone because it's totally organic. Okay.
And that is fantastic. I'm just gonna put a real quick plug in here before you
It's
go on.
behind you over there.
Well, I say plugging that up, but the Maryfield flowering plant food is more what I'll call a conventional fertilizer, or it's a synthetic fertilizer. So this is also, it's 30% slow release. The advantages to this would be, hey, it comes in a 20-pound bag, so it's really for people who might have a larger, more extensive garden that's in there. There's no odor to it. It's clean to use. And if you look at sort of per plant basis, it's actually a little more economical than the organics. So I make this analogy. It's very much like when you go grocery shopping and you might be looking in there and saying, hey, well, I've got the organic produce and I've got the conventional produce. We all make our choices based on the budgets, the size, what we like. They're all good options for the plants, and we have them all available for you at the garden center. But again, like as you were saying, Peggy, I like to wait just a little bit longer when I get closer to spring, when I see those buds beginning to swell, when I see some signs of life occurring. That's when I might apply the fertilizer. Just like I feel like, hey, if we're taking vitamins and nutrients, let's do that at the beginning of our day or the beginning of our growth cycle, so to speak.
Now, I think the next pictures that we have to show you is of a plant that both David and I enjoy in our garden. But I know that everybody in the world does not enjoy Nandina. This is Nandina domestica. It is the one that, for me, gets 5, 6 feet tall, perhaps, and has magnificent berries on it. And before we talk completely about the winter damage here, I think it bears a little discussion between the two of us as to why people are opposed to our planting Nandina. I love it. It is very showy. Right now, depending upon my microclimate, I'm getting some winter damage, but the berries are the problem. People think that they are invasive. To me, they're not. I've never had that problem. Now, you'll say the birds distribute them. They do not, because the birds don't eat the berries. It's funny how nature takes care of those things, and they seem to know that those berries are toxic. And so I personally have never had anything consume these berries. Now, you have a method of sort of taking care of that, plus talking about some of the damage.
So I would say I've had where those berries will drop to the ground and sprout.
Yeah,
And so I could see that might be what I would describe a weedy plant for sure. But right at this time of year is when I go through and I make sure and I clip all of these berries off of there and just throw them out with the trash. And I'm
Right.
doing that mostly to make my life a little bit easier so I don't have to deal with weeding them out later that's in there.
right.
I think it's also a responsible thing to do to prevent it from
From seeding.
from
yes.
seeding or going elsewhere. It's in there. But yeah, I do know that there was a situation years ago in North Georgia during freezing weather where birds, cedar waxwings, engorged themselves on it and ate to the point where they poisoned themselves. I think there were no other food sources available from at that time. That's the only time I've ever
I've never
heard of that
heard of it
happening.
since either.
And I've got to say, just on my own personal self, I mean, the berries persist through the winter because
Nothing eats
really
them.
eats them.
Yeah.
It's in there. But I put this picture in here because it's also a plant that a lot of times we're telling you or asking you to be a little patient as far as the winter damage. They will defoliate heavily in the winter time. And there's always somebody out there that then feels like the plant's dead and will pull them out of the ground and often then bring it back to the garden center. We're like, just be
Please don't
patient.
do that.
Just be
yes.
patient. Please don't do that. We just give that a couple of additional weeks and then you can start to see the same plant comes back through.
Right.
They can look awful, but I don't think I've ever seen Nandina actually outright killed in any of our winters. Damaged, beat up, yes.
Yes, and sometimes you want to cut back, and that's, I know you're talking pruning on Thursday, but today we could say too, that I certainly have removed, or if I feel I want something that's gotten too tall, for instance, this is in my own garden, and it's multi-layered. It is definitely fine. It's going to drop those leaves in this area. Now, there's some areas, David, where mine is green as can be, and it's fine. Okay, it's truly evergreen. But this is winter damage. It will drop off and be fine. You can always prune back some of it within a foot or 2 feet, and it'll come out from that, and you'll get that multi-layered effect.
So that's one that we see come into clinic often. And I'm going to just switch gears a little bit on you talking about this camellia.
Okay. Yes.
When I say switch gears, so this is an example. We've been talking about broadleaf evergreen shrubs largely, which this definitely falls into that category. Now, this is a variety. It's kind of an unusual variety. I think we only had it in our nursery one time, and I grabbed one.
Because it was
Planted it.
unusual.
Exactly, it's unusual, and it's a cascading form. It's a variety called Edlina. Don't come in shopping for it because I can tell you we don't have it. But it's a little small, delicate leaf spring bloomer. It's a hybrid, and you can see it has this cascading form. So I wanted to and did train it on this trellis that you see in the background. What I did not know, but I have since learned, because don't always do your homework first, is this is what I would call a zone 8 camellia. It's winter hardiness. We live pretty much solidly here where our nurseries are in the Fairfax area, surround immediate area. We are in what's called zone 7 as far as hardiness goes. This is a zone 8 plant. It's a little adapted further south. But over the years, because we tend to have a little bit warmer weather, we've started moving some marginal plants in the climate, plus experimenting and wanting more things to choose with. I inadvertently had planted the zone 8 plant here. So again, this is from 2015, where we also went down into below freezing, like single digit temperatures that year. This plant basically got killed all the way back. And Peggy, I was ready to pull it out of the ground because
Right.
it's
Which we're encouraging you not
Yeah.
to do.
April. This typically flowers in April. April
Right.
rolls around, no signs of life.
Right.
May comes around,
No.
no signs of life. And I was waiting. I had with our perennials manager Ramiro. I wanted to try. I asked him to special order a clematis for me that was going to grow in here. I was waiting for that new plant to arrive, and I went out there to dig it out and replace it. And lo and behold, little tiny signs of life start showing up in the first week of June.
And so it was delayed. And here it is.
Exactly.
Fine.
This was actually
Yeah.
1 year later.
It would come back from the roots.
Yes, but that took 1 year, but it did recover back from that.
Right.
So this is my thing, is like, keep the faith. It's like sometimes some of these marginal plants may not really show recovery until as late as June if they need that warmer
But
temperature.
we are
conditions.
talking about those that we have pushed the envelope.
Oh yes,
on.
this was
And
right.
we do. We try to figure it out. But while you're on this, and this is in David's garden, you are looking at warmer season, obviously. You've got coreopsis in bloom, the little golden blossom that you see. And there are some other things there. I think echinacea, there's perovskia. As far as going out and cleaning up your garden, if you leave the leaves, if you left the leaves, leave them as long as you can, because those little critters are still hybrid. I mean, they're hibernating. But clean up as you need to feel it's acceptable. These, if you left these stems over winter, you can cut them back now. I am looking at Amsonia in the center, I think. I was
Yes.
thinking that was perovskia. If it were perovskia, that's more of a bushy little perennially shrub, if you want to call it that. And I would only cut that back slightly. But yes, you can tidy up as long as you do it cautiously and perhaps store those things elsewhere where it's not so obvious, right?
Absolutely. If you were to look at my garden today, it would look nothing at all like this. Just because
No, not mine either.
both for ecological and environmental, as well as just it's been too cold to go
Yeah.
out there. I have not touched a thing in there at this point in time.
Now show them what that is like in bloom.
And I have to say, thank you, Peg. You introduced me to the Amsonia.
Yes.
That was a plant I wasn't really familiar with
I
before
love it.
starting. Oh, I know, you sold me on it, and I've never, ever, never regretted that. I'll just mention this little hydrangea back here. Please don't cut hydrangeas back. This was also casualty of that winter, so
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we
No.
don't want you doing that, but
Don't get out there and do that, especially with the Macrophylla. If you cut it back now, you will be cutting away this early season bloom.
But this is what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
Exactly. And that little stump that you saw that I almost dug out the ground, this is what it looked like last spring.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I think I'm starting over this year again. It just got hammered in there.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that's just kind of sometimes what
Okay.
happens in the garden. That's just our weather, and that we
Mhm.
learn to accept and deal with these things.
Now, talking about camellias, because camellias, and I grew up in the deep south in southern Georgia, and my mother was an incredible camellia person. But most of, well, we had the sasanquas, which are fall bloomers and very prolific. But we had the spring bloomers there. It actually starts in December, weather-wise. Microclimates, again, are so important. And even a very small garden, you will have a microclimate. This is spring blooming one from my garden. It is not dead. Why do I know that? Because I cut a stem on there and it is very much alive. So this is why we're saying today, please be patient. Don't rush out and trim back because it looks like it's dead when it isn't. This is going to come back. But with the camellia, it may be slow.
Right now, Peggy, on some of the camellias I've looked at, I think the flower buds
Maybe
are
gone.
dead.
You could be right
On
about
the
that. That doesn't look so
japonicas, right,
swift.
where the flower buds might be killed. So that
Yeah.
that can be a huge disappointment, but that's also gardening.
But it looks to me like the tippy top of that one is dead, but down further in, it isn't.
Right, which is another reason why I say just keep, I'm just like hands off. If you're
Right.
not certain, let's just give it some time.
Absolutely.
And we see what you have, because again, the plant's so resilient, you can't really go wrong with it. But
Just
I was
don't.
talking to a customer in our pruning class last Saturday, she's asking about the azaleas. I said, look, you've waited this long, just hang in there maybe another 6 weeks or something. We'll get the
Yeah.
flowers, and then you can make your informed, good decisions.
And in the next picture, David, please go into the fact that even we here, well, we're learning. It's a learning curve. You never stop learning.
Oh, no,
And we push the envelope.
yeah, that's why I always say, that's why I found most of all I enjoy when I'm doing these classes and these. I think the one thing is really we all have in common, we are what I call lifetime learners.
And yes,
And that's the way I said, the way I manage my garden now is totally different than it would have been 20 years ago. And it's all the learning process that goes on. But so this is an example, maybe, where we're taking plants that are not always reliably winter hardy, but we're trying to push the boundaries because we always like to see what's new and that's out there. So this was a planting of Indian hawthorn. Again, a wonderful evergreen shrub, but probably pushing the boundaries a little bit in its cold hardiness. And what happened in this case, they were planted late in the season, so the plants really didn't have time to develop their root system. They
Right.
were not well established. This was a new planting, and maybe they didn't get all the attention to watering that they would have really loved. And we had severe winter weather. So that's why it's always this kind of, it depends kind of question.
combinations of things.
This same planting, if they'd had a year to get their roots established, could have had a totally different outcome that's in there. So that's what I'm saying, there's not an absolute rule in this. Like I said, the microclimate, the type of plant, the
Water
history of
maybe.
that plant, the water, there's a lot of
Yeah.
these, it depends type of answers that go into it.
Absolutely. And I know when we talk about pushing the envelope and timing in planting, we get our so many beautiful camellias, particularly the spring blooming ones. We get those in the fall because a lot of them are in bloom and people can see what they look like and get excited about it. But if you choose to do that, I have had very good success when I planted something in the fall, knowing that it may not have time to get those roots properly established. I have found that by mulching well around them and giving them more protection, for instance, David, you know what I enjoy using? Pine straw.
Oh yeah, wonderful mulch.
And that helps if you are choosing to plant late, particularly something that can be a little marginal. I have had success if I've given it that little additional boost.
Yeah, it can really be just that small difference that's in there, that mulch providing like a little insulation layer around there. I feel like I should also say that's a nice thing, quite honestly, with snow. Snow is just like an insulating blanket on
It's
the ground.
wonderful, really.
It prevents it, doesn't really, keeps it at about 32 degrees, just at
Yes.
freezing. It doesn't go severely cold. And then as you mentioned in the beginning, hey, when it melts, we're also getting the water.
And slowly. Now, I think this American University?
No, this is
No.
actually where, I don't know if I should say where it is.
No, well, maybe not. Okay.
It's my gym. They won't care if I say it's this Lifetime Fitness where I go to the gym.
Okay.
But this is like an old picture, because oftentimes you don't see the damage until later. So this I wanted to put in there because I think it's such a great example of what you were talking about in terms of microclimate. So these are crepe myrtle, Natchez crepe myrtle. You can tell they are well established. This is not a new planting. They're fully rooted in there, fully matured. They had gotten too large for this spot. And so they went in and did this kind of pruning probably in like January before I took the picture.
Right.
So one thing is I'm gonna say, because crepe myrtles, as tough and durable as they are, there's occasional where they're susceptible to winter injury. Just
Yes.
it's possible, but they're usually pretty solid for us. So I like to wait until I get past the really cold weather. And something like this being what we call a late sleeper, they don't start to leaf out until
That's right.
May, really. That I prefer to wait and do my pruning on these more like a March, April time period.
Yes, I do too.
So I think that there was a combination of underlying stresses that were here. One is they did get a pretty severe pruning in January. And then what's really interesting is you look at this, the only thing separating is like this 6-foot sidewall. Right? They both have what I'm going to call restricted root zones. So both of them, because of the concrete and the pavement around it,
Right.
their root system's a little compromised. The pruning compromised by them a little bit. But here, this row of crepe myrtles had the shelter, the protection, the insulation of the building,
Yes.
and they came back and recovered just fine. These that were just that few feet away from the building, had the same stresses, but they didn't have the shelter or the protection of the building. And you can see they're just struggling
Yes,
in
they
their
are.
recovery.
Yeah, and they're almost what we often call crepe murder. But I'd like to say these are large growing crepe myrtle, and they are established. They have magnificent structure to them. And I personally would not want to take them out. But what they have done here with the severe pruning allows them to keep those in that environment, knowing that they would get much too big if they didn't prune them. And so that's pretty much acceptable under those conditions.
Absolutely. I don't have any criticism at all on
Not
that.
that, no.
But those plants did all of them get removed, but that's
Did they
because
eventually? Aw.
this was probably about 4 weeks after this picture.
Oh,
I know that's the answer, but this is where, hey, the property management, they do an excellent job in terms, they
Perfect, yeah.
always want to maintain the beauty of the
Correct.
surroundings and all that.
yeah.
And they routinely renovate their landscapes and decide, well, hey, that was just time to move on to the next
Yeah,
renovation.
and we need to go through these sort of quickly because we really do want to take some questions. In this particular one, I wanted to talk about containers too, because I have a lot of containers, and I've done these for so many years. In this one are things that normally look really good in the winter time, and carex. They're a type of grass, okay? Come in different variegations and different sizes. Now, Ramiro in our perennial section with the cover that he's got down there can cut these back to within several inches and they seem to thrive. And David and I were talking earlier, when I cut them back, they die. Okay. And I think you've had a little bit of that experience.
No, I might do just a tiny, like literally just a little trim, a little haircut on the edges, but if I cut the plant back, that's usually the end.
That's mine too. So what I do with these grasses, these low growing grasses, I do what I kind of refer to as combing them out, either with my hands with gloves on or with a rake of some sort. And you could do that anytime, but I'd like to wait a couple of weeks. And the other plant that looks really dead isn't actually dead. That is Euphorbia Ascot Rainbow. And these single digit temperatures got it, okay? It's not dead. I can cut that back and I will cut it back in different heights. And that's going to come back. And it comes back pretty quickly and it's going to be great. And in the next picture, David, if we can move along a little faster.
When are you going to cut those back?
Anytime now, but give it a week or two more perhaps because it protects it to some degree. But I'm not afraid to cut it back now. Clean it up now. If you need to tidy up a little bit to make it more pleasurable for you, go ahead and do it. Now, with that Carex, there are a few plants that when they are variegated, and sometimes a hosta can do this too, it will go back or revert to the green. You can do this anytime. And now's fine if you've got some of that that's variegated, should be variegated, and it's turning green, you can go in there and cut that green out. Because if you don't, it will completely take over.
That's that variegation come in the background.
Yeah, you can
You know,
see
out
it.
there by the green.
So that's got to go.
If there, please be submitting your questions because we'd love to hear questions, comments from you. There's be just a minute to get there.
And that's the Sarcocoa. And this is, again, microclimates. This is thriving, and most of it in my garden is, I have a lot of it. It is beautifully evergreen. And then in March, it has very fragrant flowers. It stays low, so it's a magnificent ground cover. Sarcocoa, or sweet box.
Yep.
Now,
See those little flower buds right in there.
just
So that's
beginning, and it's
that's
fine.
one again. I'm gonna say keep your hands off. Just enjoy the show. That plant's gonna recover. And look
And I
great.
just took that last week, by the way. Now, this is across from that. And I say again, a microclimate. It was more exposed. And they don't like full sun anyway. Okay. Not that this gets full sun, but it's more exposed. Now, is that going to die, David?
Not the plant. I mean, you may have some die back, a
Die
few
back.
select branches
Yes.
that you take out there, but the plant, it's gonna recover.
And quickly, we'll go through some of the others to the Helleborus. These are in the ground. They were under all that ice. Finally, they managed to peek through. The ice melted. And now I can cut away the old foliage because you can see the new buds erupting. Normally, they would be in full bloom right now, but nope, not. And the next one you can see a little
Okay.
clearer.
Well, that's giving me hope that spring is going to arrive. I mean,
It's coming.
it feels like it's forever off. Groundhog said we're waiting, but here's little signs of life.
Yes, you can see the new growth there, but you do need to cut away the old foliage because it'll be, number one, more attractive when you do that. And I wanted to put in the next one. We'll go through quickly. We do want to take some questions. This is Abelia. I love Abelia. I use it a lot. It accepts a lot of shade too. Grow in full sun, but it loves some shade too. And it isn't looking terribly good right now. It's semi-evergreen, but normally it has more leaves. And I was hoping the little teeny tiny buds along the way would be a little bit more visible, but they're not. Now, you can cut this back pretty heavily, or you can just leave it alone because it's going to come back out. And the next one, I'd like you to talk about it a little bit, because this is another push the envelope a little bit, right?
So this is your Laura Petalum, right?
Yes,
So that now, my understanding is that if you were down in Florida, South Carolina, I think this would be an evergreen shrub.
absolutely.
For us, I've only known it as a deciduous shrub. So to me, it always sheds its foliage. But
Yes, it
apparently
does.
that's just a difference in geography and climate.
Yes, in the zone, because I think it would be evergreen in zone 8 easily, but not in zone 7. I have had this, but this is in my own garden, and it's in a very prominent position. So I really, when I planted this, I thought I was planting an evergreen, and I didn't.
Yeah. But this will come back, right?
It
Because
will.
this is a more extensive damage than I would expect
It
to see.
really
right?
looks pretty bad right now, but I'm gonna hang in there. I'm not gonna do anything about it. And the other two, quickly, I do wanna speak to quickly, and then we'll go to some questions. This is kale, winter boar kale, which normally is gorgeous in the all through the winter and goes through frosts and cold. Well, it's not happy now, and it's not pretty now either. But I know, give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, all these little buds along that stem are very much alive. They're going to take over. And when those pansies kick in and they're beautiful, it's going to be beautiful again. But patience, patience, patience. Okay.
I take your word on that because it's not too much pretty going on there today.
That's not pretty at all.
That's great. Excellent. Well, so Sally, do we have any questions coming in here?
We do. First, though, we have a comment that Debbie should join. It'll be just like the TV show. This.
Oh, that's an excellent comment. Great
That
idea.
makes the two of us feel very good.
All right. First question is about frost protection fabrics. Can you use those to protect marginal plants like the camellia? Would that be effective?
That depends. The ones that I use are white, and I don't want to look at that all winter. Okay. Now, if you're just going to have those single digits, and you know it could only be temporary, the beauty of it is the frost cloth. Sun goes through it, rain goes through it. Certainly, some of that heavy snow would have given it a hard time. How do you feel about that, David?
So from what I've seen, the frost cloth gives you about 2 to 3 degrees protection. You know,
Yeah.
so it does like a blanket. It keeps a little bit of heat in there, reduce some of the transpiration. So it can certainly help. Would it have helped this winter as extreme as our temperatures get? I don't know, but I'm going to say, like Peggy said, there's nothing attractive about it. I'm sort of I don't know what I used to say lazy gardener, but then Peggy corrected me and said, no, you're just a busy gardener. I'm always looking for doing less, and I'm willing to accept certain levels of damage. That's again, like you saw a camellia. I just accept this as a part of gardening, that I'm going to have good years, I'm going to have bad years. I don't mess with those things. But if it's a really special plant to you and you're willing to put the time and effort into it, I'd say, yeah, go for it. You know, put the protection on there. It's just choices that we make.
I do want to emphasize one thing while we are talking about winter damage, etc. I am very fond of my hydrangea microphone, the big ones, okay? And I do know that they are susceptible to late frost damaging those buds. And that first spring bloom, even though I have the quote unquote ever bloomers, which they're not, they will rebloom, but never to the degree that first is. So you better believe I very carefully secure those old plants with frost cloth, because it isn't just the temperature, it's the wind.
Yeah.
Okay, so by all means, I invest in that stuff and I use it then, and I may leave it on for a couple of weeks, but I can tolerate that for 2 weeks.
And like I have used it sometimes to protect flower buds, like say on the hydrangea, and flower buds sometimes on the camellias.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
it has its place.
Yes, it does.
Gotcha. Okay. Next question. I'm gonna go to a similar question and then we'll go back to the one that's actually next, which is on pruning. So related to the frost cloth, are anti-desiccant treatments effective and on which plants?
I'm not a big fan. Usually things like this, I just don't talk about. That's how I address it. Because if I can't really get on board, then I just avoid it. But since I've been asked, I think the anti-desiccants on cut greens, like if we're doing holiday greens
Oh,
and
we use
arrangements and
Vincent
things like that,
Brothers.
100%, I've seen the value on that. On live plants, I think their value is very limited at best.
Okay,
But that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I don't know if you,
okay. Well, I personally have never
Yeah.
used them, so this is why I say this is
Yeah.
your question,
well,
David.
it's just, they're talking about wilt proof.
I know,
it's right,
yes,
yeah.
I don't use them.
No, I think on live plants, because the stomates that open and close allow for gas exchange in the plant and stuff. That's on the underside of the leaf for the most part. They need to open and close. So trying to cover the anti-transport, I'm a little hard to get on board with that. But I have friends and colleagues, people I respect that do use them.
We're gonna
to
find
good
some
results.
differential in opinions there for sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Like many topics, everybody
Yes.
has different
Yes.
opinions. Okay, now we'll go to pruning. Can you talk a little bit about crepe myrtle pruning? I have been having trouble figuring out where to make the cuts. Last year I tried not to prune, but they actually seemed less vigorous without pruning.
Hmm.
So again, on Thursday, I'm going to talk about this in much more detail on kind of the different methods and techniques to prune on there. As far as where to make the cut, I prefer to do more what I call a natural target pruning, where a branch union already exists. So if I have a branch that's coming off there, I'll selectively thin them. The sort of topping that we might have seen in the earlier picture, and then they flush out from there. That's not really a practice that I recommend or promote. I'm not saying you can't do that. You can. And as Peg was pointing out, in certain applications to limit the size and constraint of it, you can do that. So what you're talking about, the flowering, you can, if you prune them like that, you do stimulate a profusion of growth, and you stimulate more flowering on there. So if that's your goal and your objective, you pretty much, like we showed in that picture, would be a good way to do it. But if you can join me Thursday, I can go into a lot more detail and show you what, to me, I call more naturalized or natural target pruning would look like.
And really, one reason they may think that it blooms heavier is, in some respects, it blooms differently. I never prune mine, and I have some large ones, but I've got the space for it. And so the blossoms are numerous, but smaller. The thing when you prune it, as you saw in that picture, it can be beautiful, but you get those long branches that do produce bigger heads, but the problem is they also droop. So you've got to realize that's going to happen.
And they just don't have the strength
No,
that a natural
no.
branch would have, and then they start to break.
So there's the difference.
Yeah, but we'll go into some detail, quite a bit of detail on that Thursday.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and I just sent a message out if anybody is seeing their chat. If you're not, Thursday is David's plant clinic at 2 p.m. and he'll be addressing pruning in detail on Thursday for anyone interested in that. Let's see. Next, okay, another pruning. This is about Winterberry holly, and they have a comment saying this reminds me of the gardening advisor program. So we have some former gardening advisor watchers here. We had to prune our Winterberry holly last year for window installation and thus had no flowers. Would now be a good time to apply a fertilizer like Hollytone, which is normally what I would use for these hollies.
Hollytone is fine and can be applied now. Just don't prune it now, because you'll be pruning away your berries,
Okay, so you can apply fertilizer now, just no pruning.
I would with the Plantone or Hollytone, either one.
Gotcha.
They're
Okay.
all natural slow release, right?
They're all natural, and they are sort of temperature dependent. So until the microbes start working, the nutrients don't really start working. So kind of, so yeah, I would to me, I wouldn't feel like urgency. This would probably be the absolute earliest I'd put them on, but
Yes.
sometime, I'll say between now and the 1st of April would be great.
Yes, I haven't put mine yet either. I'll be waiting a little longer. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, this is our last question. So if anybody has any more questions, we have about 5 minutes. So feel free to submit them. Just do it in the next minute or two. Do you suggest watering pots over winter in general? And when should you water? Frequency of time, temperature, time of day, etc.
Well, as I said before, I'm a big container person and I have far more containers than I should. Okay. I love the learning curve too, but I just love groupings of containers. Do I water in the winter time? Absolutely do not. Because number one, my water outside is turned off. Okay, if I've planted something and I feel like it's gotten dry, I will probably take a watering can or something out there because with all these temperatures that we've had lately, you don't want broken pipes. And I turn my water off. Now, I also, in most instances, have the safety kind that cuts the backflow on it.
Right.
Does that you don't have to turn it off inside, but I have one that I have to turn off inside. Now, everything advice is relative to the situation and how dry has it been. Now we have been getting some rain, mostly in the form of snow or ice or whatever. And I see my containers and I know that they don't need that water, okay? If it were a different situation and we didn't have any precipitation, I would approach that differently. Is it warm enough to turn that water outside back on? Chances are it wouldn't work for me because those hoses are probably either disconnected or frozen, one or the other. And so this is where if I had planted something that I want to be sure it's watered, I'll take just tepid water in a big watering can out. Now, what is your response to that, David?
Exactly the same as what Peg is saying. I've made a habit, any of you that we have this conversation at Plant Clinic, I'm always asking you, well, what's your plan for watering this winter?
Right.
Just to bring the topic up, think it through. I said, because we have winter droughts. Now, this has not been the case this year.
No, not this year.
Right. I just try to let people, you can never allow the plants to go completely dry, and we'll suggest try to check on them at least once a month. That's checking on them that, you see yours and
Yes.
where I have a couple pots, I see them, and I haven't had any need for watering this winter, but each year is different. And
Yes,
we
this
can
is
never
why
allow them
everything
to go
is relative.
completely dry. And my watering plan is the same as yours, Peg. That means if they're dry and the weather permits, I'm carrying water, have them fill
Right.
water cans up from the kitchen and go out and do it. And not everybody's prepared to do that.
Right.
But you
But
need to
that
be.
is
but
how
that's
I
what it
deal
will-
with it, yes.
Yeah, because I'm not
Okay.
turning the water on and off at the main house.
No, chances are I can't do that anyway. As I said, either I've disconnected and stored those hoses, or that they're probably frozen out there in the distance and I can't use them anyway. So it's a watering can for me, okay?
All right, we've had 3 more questions come in, so we'll see if we can get to these. David, this one's for you. Is now the time to treat crepe myrtle for sooty mold with horticultural oil? Can you do that now?
So you can kind of yes and no answer. We want to do it when we have at least, I'm going to say, a day or at least 12 hours where it's dry, no rain in the forecast, and temperatures are about 50 degrees or warmer. So like today, where I think it's cold, the answer is no. Tomorrow, I'd have to look at the weather forecast, but we want at least 12 hours, preferably even longer. So where temperatures are above 50. So watch your weather forecast. We can do it in the winter time, but we have to pick the day.
Gotcha. Okay. Was given some bare root young trees and bushes. In general, when is the best time to pot them up there in mulch?
I think you used the word pot them up, so you're gonna be planting them as in pots as opposed to in the ground. But either way, sooner the better. So if you received them and you're going to pot them up, just the sooner you can do that, the better.
Okay.
Absolutely, because those roots will definitely be damaged in just mulch, as cold as it has been anyway.
Yeah, and watch the moisture on that, because again, that's the thing, they'll desiccate, they'll dry out quickly. That's why they'd be better to get them out of the package and into the pots where you have better water holding capacity, more insulation around them.
But that doesn't mean that you're supposed to put them in a really warm place either. You want them to stay dormant.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. This is our last question. Okay, let's see. We had one more comment. All right, guys, we'll do these two as the last two. Because we're at 1 o'clock now. What do you do with you have snow piled up on arborvitaes and they've spread out and standing up straight? Will they recover? So I guess the snow's weighed down the branches. So will the arborvitae recover if the snow's been weighing the branches down?
Most of the time, they'll come back into an upright position. Again, I'd say just be patient on that for now. If they don't, because of the individual plant, maybe it's kind of leggy or it's splayed out too far, then you might be going there. We use a material called arbor tie. It's for staking and tying trees up, and you may have to go in and physically tie them up and support it. And they actually do a little bit of pruning to take some of the weight off of it. And that might be needed, but for right now, I kind of give it a little more time, because they'll oftentimes come back up into the correct position.
Absolutely. Now, what I did early yesterday morning, because I'm always complaining that at Tyson's Corner, I never get as much moisture as everybody else get. But apparently yesterday, the day before, I got a lot more snow than anybody else around me. And it was heavy on a lot of things. So with a broom, I gently went out and scraped that off. Okay. Off only a few things, mind you. Yeah, that's
You have a big garden. That would be a lot.
No, I didn't do everything.
Okay. All right. Here's our last question. And this is specifically about viburnum, but it probably, I'd say, would be a good question generally. Is it too early now to plant viburnum? When's the best time to plant it in the spring?
If you're talking about evergreen viburnum, I might hold off on that just a little bit longer. But if it's a deciduous one and you're able to go out and dig a hole and don't mind working the conditions, they're totally, well, most of them are very winter hardy, but like I said, some of the evergreen ones are a little bit subject to cold damage, and I might hold off on those.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our last question. And we are at 1:03. So I will let you all, if y'all have anything you want to close with, we'll go ahead and wrap up for the day.
I'll just say it's been a pleasure, Peggy. It's good doing programs together. It's been too long.
It has been. So let us know if you enjoyed it also. And maybe David and I can encourage this more often.
Yeah, we've got to get you guys together a few times a year at least. I feel like we only do this about once a year.
But
All right.
I think we need it more than that. But I think more than anything else, what David and I really wanted to portray today is please be patient. Don't go out and dig that plant up and bring it into David and say, this plant's dead, when it really isn't. Give it a little time. Be patient. Okay?
Okay. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. So thanks for joining us today.
Yes.
Thank you all so much, everybody. Thank you. And keep an eye out for the recording and the class coupon. We'll be sending those tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Bye, Peg. Bye, David.
Bye, everybody.